Hoy vamos a hablar del arte de España y sus movimientos artísticos. En esta presentación va a haber otros ejemplos del arte de los artistas de la primera presentación, con ejemplos complementarios del arte de otros artistas de otros países. Parte 1. El arte premoderno. Recuerden a los artistas de los que hablamos. El Greco, Velázquez, Goya, Picasso, Miro y Dalí. Hoy vamos a hablar de El Greco, Velázquez y Goya, los artistas premodernos. Remember that El Greco is primarily a 15th century artist. He's considered a representative of the Spanish Renaissance and Mannerism. Velázquez is the great Spanish Baroque artist. And Francisco de Goya, pioneer of Romanticism in painting. Romanticism. Let's talk first about El Renacimiento. of anything going on in the background. You can't see the background at all. This is a water cellar in Seville, 1623. Other artists. This is a painting by Caravaggio. Caravaggio's Supper at Emmaus from 1601. It predates either of the Velázquez examples that we just saw. And this is from a biblical story where Christ is traveling incognito after the resurrection, and he is having lunch with a couple of his disciples, and they seem in this painting to be in the midst of recognizing him, and you see all sorts of actions about to take place and that are taking place. The fruit bowl that's teetering on the edge of the table, the person in the foreground, the figure in the foreground who's about to stand up. It's also an elaborate still life with lunch, and the contrast between the light and the dark is very much here. Caravaggio is such a big deal that we have to talk about him for a little bit. He's Italian. He's considered the inventor of the Baroque style of realism. His approach to realism has, according to the art historian Gilles Lambert, electrified the history of art ever since. Lambert writes further that Caravaggio was scuro, that is the dark, in chiaroscuro. Remember, chiaroscuro is that extreme contrast between light and dark. Art critic Robert Hughes writes, there was art before him and art after him, and they were not the same. A frequent theme in Caravaggio's painting is that of the sublime interrupting the mundane or the routine. So you can think of this as some guys having lunch, and then they figure out, in fact, that they're having lunch with the resurrected Christ, which is the sublime interrupting the mundane or the everyday. I want to compare Caravaggio's Baroque painting of Supper at Emmaus with another painting of the same biblical scene. This one is in the Renaissance style, and it's by Titian. Now, when I look at this painting, I immediately recognize the central figure as Christ. And you can see that this is very well lit. You can see the background. Of course, you have a window open perspective into nature that shows that we've rediscovered perspective. There's very little in the way of action except for under the table the dog and what looks like a cat. I think we can see the wounds on Christ's feet. That certainly tells us who he is, if we didn't know already. He certainly has that inner glow, inner peace, inner beatification that we would expect. I think that we see the people are beginning to figure it out. Certainly the figure on the right is in a very reverent pose. Take a look back at Caravaggio. See this in the Louvre. So go back at Caravaggio. Now this is all closed in, and it's dark. There's the chiaroscuro there. There's lots of action going on. There's much more mystery. This is very much more an incognito Christ without a beard. When I look at that figure, I don't immediately recognize him as Christ. Even though he is draped a little bit more than the other people, he certainly does not stand out the way he does. And let's take another look at the Titian, where he definitely stands out as who he is. And all of the light that's inside of this painting that is missing, if we take one more look at the Caravaggio, and we see deep shadows, we see it's very closed in, there's no view of the outside. The figures are very much closer together than they are in the Titian painting. So let's see if we can see in this Velázquez painting, this painting is called Cristo en la Casa de Marde y Maria, and we see this is should remind us of the Meninas here, where we have a mirror in which we see what's going on in the room being observed by the figure in the painting. Now here, the arrival of Christ at Marta and Maria's house is very much the sublime interrupting the everyday, making lunch, and it's very hard for whoever is paying attention, very hard whoever's making lunch for them to pay attention. We see a lot of chiaroscuro in miniature here with the white X on the black plate, but we see the deep shadow here behind these figures. Although this one has has more light than certainly than the Caravaggio. Remember Caravaggio with the scuro and chiaroscuro. Here's Rembrandt, and again that theme of the sublime interrupting the everyday. He's Dutch, 1606 to 1697. This is the Night Watch. And whatever's going on here, whether it's preparation for battle or return from battle, none of these people are paying attention to the fact that they have this angelic, glowing figure of a child in their midst. No one seems to notice. Of course, we as the observer notice, and then the tension is caused by nobody else noticing. That's a frequent technique in movies, right? That the audience knows something that the characters in the movie don't. So we as the audience members know something that the characters, the figures in this painting do not know. And that adds a sort of tension. Let's talk about Romanticism, Goya and other artists. Romantic paintings valued the expression of emotion over the control of classicism. This was achieved through the choice of highly emotive subjects, many of which commemorated dramatic, contemporary, and historical events. Romantic painters are the clear precursors of the Impressionists and the general tendency toward abstraction in Western painting. And we're going to see that in the examples, both of those things in the examples that we're going to look at. Goya in Spain, Delacroix and Géricault in France, Turner and Constable in England, and Caspar David Friedrich in Germany were the pioneers of Romanticism. Unos ejemplos. This is Goya, 3rd of May 1808, an uprising that was put down, painted in 1814. You can see the emotion, the deep emotion on the figures. This is the Colossus, and we begin to get a sort of psychological inferiority here that's important in Romanticism. Is going to become very important later on in Surrealism. This may be falsely attributed to Goya, but I like this painting as a sort of dreamscape. It's one that I have a great deal of trouble understanding, but I like to include it, and though history is not sure that it's by Goya, I'm including it here. This is an interesting painting. This is called Man Mocked by Two Women or Women Laughing. Note the years 1820 to 1823. It's a fresco transferred to canvas. That's going to be important too. It's from the museum. It's in the Museo del Prado. It's one of the black paintings, and let's just talk about those for a minute. Painted near the end of his life, Goya's black paintings portray haunting and nightmarish images. Two nearly fatal illnesses, near deafness, and anxiety about relapse left Goya's outlook bleak. Using oils, Goya painted the 14 black paintings directly on the walls of his dining and sitting rooms. Neither commissioned nor intended for public exhibition, art historian and proto guide Teresa Vega these paintings are as close to being hermetically private as any that have ever been produced in the history of Western art. After Goya's death, the murals were removed from the walls and attached to canvas and eventually came to hang in the Prado. Otros artistas. And you can see this is definitely a painting that suggests Romanticism, but is an important historical event. By J.M.W. Turner, the English artist, 1775 to 1851. This is the burning of the Houses of Lords and Commons in 1835, painted in 1835. This is one of two views of the same event. We'll see the second. Look how similar this painting by Velázquez is to the Turner painting. This is from 1794. What I think is interesting about this painting is it certainly suggests the kind of images that we see in the black paintings, but doesn't have the psychological tension of the black painting, which we'll see in the black paintings, which we'll see another one of. There's a lot of nightmare stuff going on in this painting, another of the black paintings, Asmodea or La Visión Fantástica. Again, notice the years 1820 to 1823, and this is oil on gesso, mural later transferred to canvas, and it's in the Prado Museum in Madrid, so it is one of the black paintings. And this is a very, very famous romantic painting by the German painter Caspar David Friedrich. It's called Der Wanderer über den Nebelmeer, or Wanderer Above the Sea of Fog, painted in 1818. That is the end of part 1. I hope you enjoyed it, and we'll talk again.